Are you going to tell him, or should I? The text message flashed on Lily's phone screen like a bullet piercing through her comfortable reality. It wasn't the first message she had received from this number, but it was the most direct and terrifying. Lily stared at the message, her heart pounding in her chest. The usual sounds of her home, children's laughter from the living room, the hum of the dishwasher, faded into the background, overtaken by the deafening rush of blood in her ears. The words on the screen seemed to burn into her mind, making it impossible to focus on anything else. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the warm sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains, but she felt cold inside. The phone buzzed again, a vibration that rattled her nerves further. She knew who it was. She knew what this was about, and she knew deep down that there was no way to make it go away. The number wasn't saved in her contacts, but she didn't need to see the name to know who it belonged to. She had been expecting this moment, dreading it for weeks now. The man on the other end of those messages had always been a looming presence in her life, a ghost that she had tried to keep hidden. But now he was threatening to step out of the shadows. Her husband, David, was due home any minute. The kids were playing, oblivious to the chaos brewing inside their mother's head. Lily quickly deleted the messages, her hands trembling. She couldn't let David see them. Not yet. Not until she figured out what to do. She forced herself to breathe deeply, trying to push down the panic rising in her throat. Just as she managed to regain some semblance of control, the front door creaked open, and David's familiar voice filled the hallway. "Hey, honey, I'm home," he called out, his tone as cheerful as ever. Lily jumped, almost dropping her phone. She hastily shoved it into her pocket and plastered a smile on her face as she stood to greet him. Her heart was still racing, but she couldn't let him see her fear. "Hi, babe," she replied, forcing her voice to sound steady as she walked over to him. She gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, hoping he wouldn't notice the tension in her body. David wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. His embrace was warm and familiar, and for a moment, Lily allowed herself to relax into it. This was her safe place, the life she had built with him, the life she had put in jeopardy. "How was your day?" David asked, his eyes twinkling as he looked down at her. "It was good," Lily lied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Just the usual stuff." David nodded, oblivious to the turmoil beneath the surface. "Great. I was thinking we could order in tonight. Maybe from that new Italian place down the street?" "That sounds perfect," Lily agreed, grateful for the normalcy of his suggestion. For a moment, she could pretend everything was fine. But as she turned to help him with his coat, she felt the weight of the secret she was carrying pulling her down again. The man who had sent those messages wasn't going to go away quietly. He wanted something from her, something that could destroy the life she had worked so hard to create. Lily knew she was running out of time. She had to figure out how to keep her world from crumbling before it was too late. But the truth had a way of coming out, no matter how hard she tried to bury it. And this truth was one that could ruin everything. A few hours later, after dinner had been ordered, eaten, and the children put to bed, Lily found herself alone in the living room, staring blankly at the television screen. David had gone up to his study to finish some work, leaving her with her thoughts she didn't want to confront. The phone, now sitting on the coffee table in front of her, felt like a ticking time bomb. She could almost hear it, a steady, ominous ticking that only she could sense. The man behind the messages, his name was Marcus, had been patient, but she knew his patience had limits. How long before he followed through on his threats? How long before he decided to tell David everything? She picked up the phone, her hands shaking again. Her mind was racing, trying to come up with a way out of this mess. She opened the messaging app and stared at the blank screen, unsure of what to say, how to respond. Apologizing would be pointless. Marcus wasn't looking for an apology. He wanted something else. Something she wasn't sure she could give. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to tell him to leave her alone. to let her go back to the life she had before. But she knew that wasn't going to happen. Marcus wasn't the kind of man to let go easily. She had known that when she first got involved with him, but back then, it hadn't seemed to matter. Now, everything had changed. Lily couldn't stop herself from thinking back to the first time she had met Marcus. It was at a business conference out of town, one that she had attended reluctantly. David had been swamped with work and couldn't join her, so she had gone alone, looking forward to a few days of quiet and maybe a bit of networking. She had met Marcus at the hotel bar on the second night, after a long day of meetings and presentations. He had been charming, with a smooth voice and a confidence that was hard to resist. He was older than her by a few years, with a kind of magnetism that drew her in almost immediately. They had talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories, and by the end of the night, she found herself feeling things she hadn't felt in a long time. She told herself it was harmless, just a bit of flirting, nothing more. But as the night wore on and the drinks flowed, she found it harder and harder to ignore the pull she felt towards him. When he leaned in and kissed her, she didn't push him away. That night, she made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The affair with Marcus had started as something small, something she thought she could control. They met whenever they could, always in secret, always far away from home. It was thrilling, exciting in a way that her life with David had not been in years. But as time went on, the thrill began to fade, replaced by guilt and fear. And then, a few weeks ago, Lily had discovered she was pregnant. The realization had hit her like a truck. She and David had talked about having another child, but she hadn't expected it to happen now, not when everything was so complicated. At first, she had convinced herself it was David's baby, but as the weeks went by, the doubts started to creep in. She did the math over and over again, and each time, the answer was the same. There was a very real possibility that Marcus was the father. That's when the messages started. Marcus had always been possessive, but when Lily told him she was pregnant, something in him changed. He became more demanding, more insistent. He wanted to know if the baby was his, and when she couldn't give him a definitive answer, he started pushing her harder. He wanted her to leave David, to start a new life with him, and when she refused, the threats began. The latest message was the culmination of weeks of escalating tension. Marcus was tired of waiting. He wanted her to make a choice, and if she didn't, he would make it for her. Lily's phone buzzed again, startling her out of her thoughts. She picked it up, her heart pounding. "I'm not playing games, Lily. You have until tomorrow to tell him. If you don't, I will." She stared at the words, the weight of them crushing her. Tomorrow. That was all the time she had left. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let Marcus destroy her family. But what could she do? If she told David the truth, it would shatter him. He loved her, trusted her, and this would break his heart. But if she didn't tell him, Marcus would. And that might be even worse. Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had gotten herself into an impossible situation, and now there was no way out. No matter what she did, someone was going to get hurt. But as she sat there staring at the message, a thought began to form in her mind. It was a desperate, reckless thought, but it was the only one she had. She could disappear. She could take the kids and leave, start over somewhere far away where Marcus couldn't find her. It would mean leaving everything behind: her home, her friends, her life with David. But it might be the only way to protect her family from the truth. It was a crazy idea, one that she knew might not even work. But at this point, she didn't have any other options. Lily stood up, her mind racing. If she was going to do this, she had to act fast. She would need money, clothes, and a plan. She would need to figure out where to go, how to get there without leaving a trail. But most of all, she needed to stay calm. She couldn't let David suspect anything, not until she was ready to leave. Taking a deep breath, She made her way upstairs to the bedroom, her mind already working through the details of her plan. She had one night to pull this off, one night to get everything ready. Tomorrow, her life was going to change forever, one way or another. Lily lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the hours ticked by. The bedroom was dark, save for the faint glow of the alarm clock on David's nightstand. The digits blinked relentlessly, reminding her that time was slipping away. Every second brought her closer to the moment of truth, and she still hadn't decided what to do. David slept soundly beside her, his breath slow and steady. She could hear the soft rise and fall of his chest, the familiar rhythm that had lulled her to sleep so many nights before. But tonight, there was no comfort to be found in the sound. Instead, it felt like a countdown, each breath a reminder of how much she stood to lose. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The plan she had concocted earlier seemed more and more impossible the longer she lay there. Disappearing without a trace sounded easy in theory, but the logistics were daunting. Where would she go? How would she survive without any support? And what about the children? How could she uproot their lives without causing them even more harm? But the alternative, to stay and face the inevitable, seemed even worse. She pictured Marcus showing up at their doorstep, his face twisted in anger, ready to destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. She imagined David's face as he learned the truth, the betrayal that would cut him deeper than any wound. It was a nightmare she couldn't bear to face. Lily turned her head to look at David, her heart aching. He was a good man, better than she deserved. He had always been there for her, through thick and thin, never wavering in his love. And she had repaid him by betraying him in the worst possible way. She felt the tears welling up again, but she blinked them back. She couldn't afford to break down now, not when she needed to think clearly, to make a decision that would determine the rest of her life. The phone on her nightstand buzzed, making her jump. She grabbed it quickly, not wanting the noise to wake David. Her heart pounded as she read the new message from Marcus. "Morning. Time's almost up. Don't make me come over there." The cold, threatening tone of the message sent a shiver down her spine. Marcus wasn't bluffing. If she didn't act soon, he would show up at their house, and there would be no hiding the truth anymore. Lily sat up in bed, her mind racing. She had to do something. But what? As she stared at the message, an idea began to form in her mind. It was risky, more than risky. It was dangerous, but it might be her only shot. If she could meet Marcus before he came to the house, maybe she could buy herself some time. Maybe she could convince him to back off, to give her more time to figure things out. But that meant facing him alone, without David's knowledge. It meant walking straight into the lion's den, with no guarantee of coming out unscathed. She glanced at David again, then back at her phone. The clock was ticking. She had to make a choice. Taking a deep breath, Lily typed a quick reply to Marcus. "I'll meet you. Name the place." His response came almost immediately. "The motel. Room 214. Be there in an hour." Lily's heart pounded as Marcus's grip tightened on her arm. The room felt stifling, and every second stretched painfully. "Marcus, please, just give me more time," she pleaded. Marcus's face was hard, his voice cold. "Time's up. You choose now, or I'll do it for you." Before Lily could respond, the door burst open. David stood there, his face a mix of shock and hurt. "Lily, what's happening here?" Lily's heart sank as she saw the pain in David's eyes. She tried to explain, but Marcus stepped back, smirking. "Looks like he's figured it out," he said, heading for the door. "I'm done here." David's eyes darted between Lily and Marcus. "Who is this? What's going on?" Lily's voice trembled. "David, I'm so sorry. This is someone from my past. The baby might be his. I didn't know how to tell you." David's face fell, his voice barely audible. "You've been lying to me?" Betraying me? I didn't want to hurt you, Lily said, tears streaming down her face. I was afraid. I'm so sorry. David shook his head, stepping back. I need time to process this. I can't just forgive you now. Lily nodded, devastated. I understand. I'll give you space. I love you. Without another word, David walked out, leaving Lily alone. The weight of her choices crushed her as she left the motel, facing the reality that her life was in shambles. As dawn broke, Lily knew she had to confront the consequences of her actions and work to rebuild the trust that had been broken. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face it.